Hello, everybody. It's me, your favorite classmate, Sami Islam, and I'm joined today by the excellent Blake Murphy, former writer at the Athletic and current radio host with Sportsnet. Blake, thank you for joining Journalism 4308.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, I'm going to cut straight through the bullshit because I have a lot of work to do and I want to catch Monday Night Football. So, how has analytics reporting, do you think, changed the sports writing industry?
Yeah, I think it's changed it in a couple ways, and one of them is it led to like 5 or 6 years in each sport of just arguing about analytics, which is not great content, but people seem to want to do it. The bigger thing is it's just another storytelling tool, right? And this is why I've never really understood a ton the analytics versus eye test or analytics versus traditional or whatever, because to me it's just another way to help tell the story. It's more data, it's more ways to confirm what you're watching, it's more ways to inform a reader. So for me, that's how I've used it. I do think it's opened up some opportunities for specialists in the journalism industry, where you see some people who dig down on the analytics, focus on the analytics, and end up on the team side, or end up building a career out of that. You look at like a Dom on the NHL side at the Athletic, or the nylon calculus guys on the basketball side, or Fangraphs on the baseball side. It's another way to observe and talk about the game and tell the stories of the game. And I don't think I think that's always a good thing, and through that it's opened up more opportunities.
Okay, and how do you pick which specific data sets you're going to use when you're telling a story? Do you have like something in mind while you're watching the game, or do you like go through and look at them afterwards and then pull trends?
Yeah, I mean, I generally, step one is, what am I seeing, right? Like, I don't have an analytics sheet up. I'm not tracking anything. I'm not looking at the analytics sites live during a game. I'm taking notes. I'm trying to track some plays. I'm trying to, it's more of the story of the game. And then the big thing is, it's really hard. Like with basketball, you're watching 10 guys interact on the fly. Your eyes can't pick up all of that, right? And like you want to think that you're not just ball watching or whatever, but you've got to look at some stuff to confirm your eye test. So that's generally the first thing I do is, hey, if it feels like they really got killed on the offensive glass tonight, look that up and contextualize that. Cause like 8 offensive rebounds doesn't really mean anything to someone. You've got to, hey, what is this team normally give up? What is the league rate right now? So that's one. And then I think the other one is, so the first one is, you want to use it to confirm your eye test. And the second one is, what are people curious about?
Obviously, you've switched from being a writer to now a radio host, and you had a podcast for a while. I think numbers are very easy to write about. People can scroll back up and see the numbers, but it's obviously a lot different when you're speaking to someone. How do you kind of use analytics as a radio host or as on video without the visual effects?
Yeah. So the thing that I've always used, I call the dad test. And it's basically like, so when I was writing about hockey analytics, could I explain it in a way that my dad would understand? Because my dad doesn't have any analytics or math background or anything. He's like the typical watch the Saturday night game and listen to Don Cherry fan. So, am I explaining it easily enough and accessibly enough for my dad to know what I'm talking about? And if not, I probably need to bring that down a level, because you don't want to talk down to your audience. You want to, you want to meet them where they're at and bring them up a little bit with you. So that's one. And then the other one is, and this is something that I'm trying to get used to in radio segments, and then as well as those video quick hits that I'm doing. There are studies to suggest that after you throw 3 stats at a person, you lose them if you add more on top of that. So that's what I'm trying to, like, there was one today where I'll use an example. So the Jays signed Kevin Gossman before we came on the air this morning, or last night rather. And I'm trying to compare and contrast him and Robbie Ray. And I went into a number of things, and it's good information, but it's something that, like you said, in an article, I could just put a table there and people can look through that and take as much detail from that as they want, or just gloss through it to keep getting on with the story of Gossman versus Ray, because some people want that data. Some people just want to know, hey, they were roughly equal and Gossman might age a little better because of X. But what I screwed up in this radio segment was I went through to basically, it was the radio equivalent of reading a table out loud. And that's not as accessible. You lose people, and you as a speaker, you lose your thread of what's the story I'm using these numbers for. And as a listener, you just lose track of where you are in the conversation and what these numbers mean.
Who do you think the readers tend to be for sports stories that are a little bit more analytical?
Yeah, so I think betting is certainly one of them, and I think if you're a sharp bettor or a sharp fantasy player, you're not necessarily reading articles to get recommendations, right? Like if I'm a sharp, I don't care what Dom's model says or what Blake's take on the Raptors game is. That's not as important to me as just being a smart basketball fan. So this doesn't apply at like the highest levels of being a sharp, but if you're someone who wants to lay money on every game every night, or a couple games every night, being a more intelligent fan is the best way to do that, or the most accessible way to do that. And that's where I think smart writing and writing that incorporates data can be advantageous to someone. So I think for some people, it's just like, hey, some people just data oriented. Some people just want to be smarter fans and come at the game from an extra perspective. But there are definitely some people who like, hey, if you're reading up on, we'll use The Athletic as an example. If you have an Athletic subscription and you're reading the fantasy baseball stuff every day, or you're reading, a number of NBA beat writers, you can probably sense things coming like, hey, I should jump on this guy on the waiver wire, earlier than he's hitting the recommendation list. Or, hey, if it's DFS, something's been trending this way. And I think based on something Blake wrote, Utah could have a bigger role in these next couple games or something like that. So that's where there's, I tried to sell people on The Athletic when I was there, is like, it's not just a subscription. Like you can look at that as there's a return on investment component if you're a fantasy player and a sports gambler.
You make a very good point. I'm a Ravens fan. And so like this past week, I was reading up on the Browns, and I was expecting like a huge running game because the Ravens terrible defense this year, but I was pleasantly surprised. And I do think it changes the way you watch sports for sure. My next question. Go ahead.
Yeah, you think Stefanski should have read that stuff a little bit too, eh? Because they abandoned it more. I know they didn't have much going, but
yeah, I mean the receiving corps was terrible, but that's a different story. And I think data, the same way as any other storytelling tool, there are ways to like include it and also opt to leave it out. Do you think there are any ethical considerations that need to be made when looking at data and including it in storytelling about sports?
Like in terms of yeah, I mean, there are some, like obviously one thing that sports leagues have had to focus on a little bit and work out with players unions is like how much biometric data is fair game. And that's not at the journalist level. They would never make that publicly available to us, but like there's going to be a push for a lot more player injury information as sports betting ramps up and stuff. And like these leagues are going to want integrity fees to be a part of it and share their data and stuff. And there is an ethical element as well in terms of how much can you give away about a player's health and stuff like that. And then, you get into it a bit more at draft time too, where, you have all the combine measurements and stuff. And the way we talk about draft picks sometimes is not very good in terms of like, I don't know, just ethically, there's some, it's just a little gross sometimes. In terms of just like using analytics as a storyteller in general, I think I would hope anyone who's coming at a story with an analytic bent has a reason to do so and isn't, I don't think it's a terrible thing to be like, hey, this is, this player's not as good as maybe you thought because of X, Y, and Z. I don't think that's unethical, but I think that there's, it's maybe not, I don't think it's as deep as ethical, but I think there's like an integrity component to, are you presenting the data earnestly or are you cherry picking? And that's where I think there can be a bit of an issue still on the journalism side, is like, hey, you might have 5 data points and 3 support your point and 2 refute it. It's a little crummy to only present 2 or sorry, the 3 that support your point and not the other 2, right? But I don't think that's unethical. I think it's just bad writing.
Okay, well, those are all the written questions I had, but do you have anything else you want to add for future sports journalists that are interested in analytics writing?
Yeah, I think the important thing is that there's an audience for hardcore analytics writing, and that's cool, especially if you're a math person or a programming person, you're really into that. But for the most part, your job as a writer is going to be to take a complex analytics thing and make it accessible to an average person. Like, it's a much better skill set to have in terms of your own understanding, but really for job prospects, and is this a journalistic tool for you, is can you make that stuff accessible, and can you don't want to dumb it down, you don't want to water it down, but accessibility is really important. And it's where there's, it's kind of the role of a journalist anyway. But there's also like a bit of a market gap at times, I think anyway. So there's some opportunity there if you can do that well.
Nice. Well, that's all I have for you, Blake. Thank you so much for your time. And on behalf of all my classmates, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.